Tonight on The Brink.
This is a scam. There's a rigged trial. It shouldn't have been in that venue.
How to save America from two men putting themselves before the country.
And it's reckless. It's dangerous. It's irresponsible for anyone to say this was rigged just because they don't like the verdict.
Where is Gerald Ford when you need him?
A full, free, and absolute pardon unto Richard Nixon.
Hamas gets a win.
It's a roadmap to an enduring ceasefire and the release of all hostages.
President Biden proposes a new deal that leaves the terrorists in charge of Gaza. Will that stop the coming protests at the DNC in Chicago? And reality check.
I'm done. I'm done with us.
A Democratic California state senator says she's done with her own party's soft on crime policies.
I don't want people buying little girls anymore. And I'm tired of saying it's okay.
So why is Boston's progressive mayor going to the left of California? Welcome to the fairest show on television. We made it to Friday, and boy, does it feel like a long week. Welcome. So as we head into the weekend and we all gather around with our friends and family to talk about the week, think about this. Where do we go from here as a country? It's no surprise the Donald Trump verdict brought out the worst in America, and it keeps getting worse. Unfortunately, there is no Gerald Ford to sacrifice himself for the good of the country. In retrospect, we should thank him for the example. But let's just play the what-if game. What if New York Governor Kathy Hochul pardoned Trump tomorrow? So the voters can decide on November 5th and prove Trump wrong that Democrats aren't rigging the system against him. It sounds crazy, but you never know. It could save democracy. Speaking of democracy, Democrats now say the only way to protect democracy is by silencing those who dare speak up about yesterday's verdict.
If they tear it down and they are allowed to physically intimidate the people in the system and get the American people to not accept the legitimacy of this court's finding because it's their guy who's been targeted by it, that's the end.
Well, if that's the end and Trump really is a threat to democracy, that the experiment from 250 years ago would end, the republic would cease to exist, why would Democrats turn over power if Trump wins in November? You can't have it both ways. If you must keep Trump out, the only way to save democracy would be to question the election results. Former presidential candidate and Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee is with us in a second. We start with Kelly Meyer with the war on words between former President Trump, current President Biden. She is outside Trump Tower in New York. Good evening, Kelly.
Hey there, Leland. Well, you hit on it right there. It was another split screen moment with the current president and the former president. I'll start with the former, who was speaking inside Trump Tower here behind me earlier today. He talked for a little bit over 30 minutes. He was railing against the trial and the judge. He didn't have his usual entourage behind him, just a backdrop of American flags. And he didn't have a teleprompter. As we said, he railed against that trial and the criminal justice system. Take a listen to this.
We have a president and a group of fascists that don't want to do anything about it because they could right now, today, he could stop it. We're living in a fascist state.
Now, in the meantime, President Joe Biden over at the White House announced that he would have a speech this afternoon. They said it was going to be focused on the Middle East. But right off the top, he came out and said he wanted to address what happened in New York City, and he talked about the rule of law. Take a listen.
Our justice system has endured for nearly 250 years. And it literally is the cornerstone of America, our justice system. The justice system should be respected, and we should never allow anyone to tear it down.
Now, as we've been talking about, Leland, we continue to see both sides here fundraising off of this. We know the Trump campaign saying they raised at least so far $39 million and counting. The Biden campaign also fundraising off of this, though they didn't share their fundraising numbers with us. Leland.
All right, there you go. President Biden off on vacation this weekend. Former President Trump, we understand, will be at a fundraiser as well out in Bedminster, New Jersey. Kelly, thank you very much. With that, former Arkansas governor and friend of the show, Mike Huckabee. Good to see you, Governor. Thank you. What if, as we sort of look at things going forward, and maybe with a little bit of hope, what if rather than spend 30 minutes in a grievance fest as he did today, Donald Trump said, I'm here to fight for the American people, and here are the 5 or 6 issues that I am going to fight for the American people on that they care about: immigration, inflation, crime, and went down a list rather about things important to voters rather than important to him.
Leland, let's be fair. I mean, the guy just had the worst day of his life in a trial. I don't think he's going to come out today and say, the day after he gets run over by a truck, hey, how about those Cowboys? No, it's not going to be like that. So today was all about talking about the trial, the verdict, something that I think many of us were still in shock that it ever happened, and maybe not as shocked as that he was convicted in New York, given the way the judge ran the trial and really put his thumb on the scale, if not just sat down on the scale. But I think if you listen to Donald Trump's speeches, the one in the South Bronx just a week or so ago was a brilliant recitation of what he wants to do for this country. So, cut him some slack for today. Okay. But listen to his campaign speeches. He goes through those issues pretty carefully. And I thought that's why he had such a great crowd, and they responded brilliantly to him.
Fair enough. And I guess we wait now for the next rally. I don't know about you. I was surprised there wasn't one suddenly planned for this weekend. But his supporters have responded. $35 million, which is an unbelievable amount of money to raise in 24 hours. I think the number has actually gotten more than that since the conviction. 30% were new donors. Honest Democrats I talked to are terrified that they have perhaps awakened a beast, if you will. Or poke the lion of independent voters who just don't like this. What if Kathy Hochul pardoned Donald Trump tomorrow? Wouldn't that take away the "this is rigged, I'm the victim" argument?
It would certainly, I think, show some grace on Kathy Hochul's part. I don't think she'll ever do it, but it still doesn't erase the fact that this should never have been brought to trial. This was an absurdity. And I think the more people saw through this, the jurors were kept from a lot of the information that many of us could follow. They didn't get it. So I'll cut them some slack. But the American people saw through this. And that's why you saw this fundraising bonanza for the Trump campaign. Leland, I had people contact me through text, emails, and phone calls all yesterday. And these were people who basically were never Trumpers. And many of them said, look, I didn't like the guy, never voted for him, but I just sent him a contribution and all in and just wanted you to know. And some of them really surprised me. And I've seen that over and over today. And a lot of it is because people realize that when the game gets played unfairly, when you have a sitting president who unleashes all the levers of government that he can influence against his opponent, then something just doesn't smell right to the American people. They like to just make that decision themselves when they go to vote.
Yeah, nothing speaks louder, I guess you could say, than voting, but really nothing speaks louder than people putting their money where their mouth is. And if you've gotten 50 texts, I always figure for every one person who texts or emails or calls, there's really 50 people like them out there. So that speaks volumes. Next comes the issue. And look, a lot of people didn't think he was going to get convicted. Now a lot of experts say there's no way that Donald Trump is going to jail, and yet within minutes of the conviction, there was a lot of people hoping for just that. Take a listen.
I think Alvin Bragg is going to ask for a sentence of incarceration, and I think Judge Merchan will very seriously weigh that.
For anyone else, this would mean jail. It is so hard when you're thinking about who, if they commit this kind of crime, should go to jail.
The excitement on MSNBC continues. But if you think about what happened to Trump and the groundswell of support that has happened by his conviction, if he gets sentenced to jail, there's going to be Republicans big name Republicans pitching tents outside Rikers to hold some kind of vigil. At that point, wouldn't it almost be political malpractice for Kathy Hochul not to pardon him?
Well, I think it'd be absurd to even attempt to put a former president in jail for what they alleged was a bookkeeping crime. Alvin Bragg doesn't put people in jail who hit elderly ladies in the back of the head with a brick in broad daylight. He doesn't put people in jail who are illegal immigrants who attack a cop with video cameras rolling. So if he, honest to God, thought that he could put a former president over this ridiculous bookkeeping issue that I don't think even is an existent crime, if he really tried to do that, would the last person out of New York please turn off the lights? Because I think most people would say this city is dead.
Well, Governor, we always appreciate the perspective and a little bit of humor on a Friday night. Thank you, sir. It's good to see you as always. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Leland. Have a great weekend.
Yeah, you too, sir. President Biden says it's dangerous to attack the rule of law, but what happens when the lawyers break the rules?
And it's reckless. It's dangerous. It's irresponsible for anyone to say this was rigged just because they don't like the verdict.
Remember Happy Days, Americana, and America's middle class? How to stop inflation from destroying the uniquely American dream for good.
By gray sky, hello blue. Nothing can hold me when I hold you. Feels so right, it can't be wrong. Rocking and rolling all week long.
Both Republicans and Democrats agree the very credibility of America, of our legal system, is under threat. And that's actually a huge issue around the world because the world believes in the American legal system. That's why people invest here. There's some real questions about the world looking at America in a different way after yesterday's verdict. But here's President Biden today defending America's legal system, responding to Donald Trump's claims that the New York case was rigged against him.
And it's reckless. It's dangerous. It's irresponsible for anyone to say this was rigged just because they don't like the verdict.
Okay, that is a fair point, but what if it was kind of rigged? A judge who donated against ethic rules to a Stop Trump cause, a DA who ran promising to get Trump using a never-before legal theory where state prosecutors could use federal law as a predicate crime for breaking state law, and even most lawyers would agree, some very questionable jury instructions. With us now, Shan Wu, former federal prosecutor and Clinton Justice Department official, Michael DeSharo, former assistant attorney in the Bronx, that is a prosecutor and now criminal defense attorney in New York City. Michael, does Trump at least have a little bit of a point? Is it rigged or stacked against him?
Well, he has a point in this sense, in the legal sense, that I've never seen a prosecution like this. The jury instructions are highly problematic. Some of the rulings of the judge are highly problematic. So there's a lot to work on the appeal here. And he's going to get 2 shots at the appeal. He's going to get a shot at the appellate division. And most likely, 95% chance, the Court of Appeals is going to review this if for some reason the appellate division says no to him, just like they did the Weinstein case, because of the importance of the case and the precedent that it's setting.
Jen, if we try to take the politics out of this and just look at bedrock faith in America's legal system, should there be a concern that the first time you prosecute and charge and convict a former president of a felony, it's got to be so airtight, so clean, so clearly done with fairness in mind that it is unquestionable and unimpeachable?
No, because there's no way to actually apply that standard. The only way to apply it is to go through the process and then have it reviewed through the appellate courts or even the U.S. Supreme Court. The public scrutiny of that is never going to come to an agreement to say this was perfect, it was an airtight process. The only way to check and test that process is to actually use it.
Do you agree that Donald Trump has some legitimate grievances here?
Not grievances. I think he has a couple of issues on appeal that could have some traction. It deserves a serious look on appeal. But this notion was rigged, to that, colloquially, it means before it even started, no need for process. They already decided. And I think the process he just went through puts a lot of that. They went through a process.
Well, I mean, I guess there's courts in North Korea and in Russia that go through processes too, but there is a foregone conclusion to it.
Right. And I think when you look at those, if you take a look at what their process is, it calls into question whether that's just a facade. But here, we've seen now, we weren't in the courtroom, unfortunately, with the cameras, but we see how long it took. We see the kind of tough cross-examination the witnesses were subjected to. So it does not look like just a show process where, was that a fair trial and a quick hanging in the morning.
Okay. Well, there's been no hanging yet. Michael, I looked up on the television today and I saw Michael Cohen, who admitted under oath to the crime of larceny, stealing from the Trump organization, his employer. If nobody's above the law, how long reasonably could we expect to wait before an indictment from Alvin Bragg's office on the charge of theft?
Of Michael Cohen?
Yeah.
That's simply never going to happen. You don't indict and prosecute your former star witness in a trial which you just won against the former president. And there's simply no real world where I see that happening, because you'd be undermining your own case on appeal. Once we get to the appellate division, they say, and your honors, the star witness has just been indicted.
Well, he was already indicted, right? I mean, he was already a felon.
Right, but he was indicted in this case for what things that he did in this case. So I don't expect to ever see that happen.
All right, well, there you go. Shan, wanted to get you on this. One, and this has been a big talking point on the right, get your sense of this. Matthew Canaglio, who is chief counsel of the New York Attorney General's Office, chief of staff, Labor Division, Obama administration, senior DOJ official in the Biden administration, and then took a small but a pay cut to go from being a DOJ official at the Department of Justice to being the senior counsel of the Manhattan DA right before the indictment of Donald Trump. How rare is it for someone who's a senior DOJ official to then go work in a state's attorney's office?
I'm not familiar with doing that. It sort of depends on, what reasons they had for doing that. The Manhattan DA's office is hardly, sort of like a rural kind of no-place office. It's a major office in the country. That's not really a step down. State Attorney General's office, if they had something very specific in his area he was interested in doing, I do think the spin on it as being kind of an inside job, they sent something from DOJ, I don't really think it holds water if you take a close look at that, because the mere fact that he happened to be at DOJ, which is a pretty big place, doesn't mean that he was working on these issues and then was contributing, to help.
Okay, well, okay.
And if he was, there's actually nothing wrong with that.
Okay,
it's
well,
okay to do that.
I guess there may be a sense there's nothing wrong with it legally. I think people could argue whether or not there's a sense of wrong with it. Ethically, I think this is interesting that the left and the right have kind of come together on something. Eric Erickson, I do have to say the irony is a bit rich watching people who've spent a month trying to discredit the Supreme Court insist we all respect the verdict of a Manhattan court. And then, so that's from the right, and here is Kate Bedingfield from the left. Take a listen.
From a political standpoint, the pearl clutching amongst Republicans about the idea that he would go to jail from the people who were cheering Donald Trump's lock her up chant in 2016 is a little rich, I would say. It's a little rich.
And then they went on to say that they all needed Bloody Marys, which I feel like I need one, or maybe even a martini right now after this week. But are we at the point where people are going to just sort of start believing the laws they want and that they should be applied only to the people that they dislike?
I really don't think so. I think that, to me, my bias may be showing here, but the idea that on the right they're saying this opens this Pandora's box, it's terrible, we're going to have kind of rogue, politicized state AGs going after the left, they'll go after Biden. There's a problem with that for me, because if you're really concerned about that, you should then not be egging on the state AGs to go after Biden.
Yeah, we're going to. Well, look, I think it's an excellent point. We're actually getting into it in the next segment, and it's not only egging on the state AGs. It's good to see you. It's been a great week. Thank you, Michael. Thank you as always. Lots to talk about before July 11th when the sentencing comes down. Good to see you. Boston is quickly becoming the hub of failed blue city policies, and its mayor only wants to make it worse. Imagine a city where crimes like shoplifting, breaking and entering, larceny aren't actually crimes. Well, you don't have to imagine it. Why Boston wants to become like San Francisco when we come back. Just in time for summer vacation, new data shows what we all feel. America, in a way, is at an economic death cross. Prices keep going up, and consumers have less money to spend on all the things they want to buy. It's why credit card loans are at an all-time record. CNN Business reports groceries cost 33.5% more now than they did in early 2020. 78% of Americans say they're living paycheck to paycheck, all while the majority of Americans believe we are in a recession. Technically, we are not, but that's how people feel. Trish Regan, co-founder of the investment research firm 1776research.com, host of the Trish Regan Show, is with us. Lovely to see you. Thank you. They say the consumer is the engine of the American economy. What happens when the consumer says, I have money to pay my rent and enough money to pay and buy some of my groceries, but not to buy things that are luxury items or non-essentials and not to go on vacation?
Well, you get into a recession. I mean, pure and simple, that's what happens. And these things happen. Right now, you've got a recipe for a little bit of growth. I mean, right, we're seeing a little bit of growth in the economy, which is encouraging. But then you say, well, why are we seeing the growth? And the Federal Reserve recently came out and they said, we're seeing it because of immigration, which is interesting, but not necessarily helpful, because a lot of the people that are coming into the country right now across the border don't have a lot of money to spend. So the little bit that they're getting, or perhaps handouts from government, et cetera, is adding somewhat to the economy, but I don't think it's enough to really sustain things. So if everyday Americans really start cutting back, you're going to find yourself in a treacherous situation. Stagflation is being talked about. We haven't heard this term, right? Thrown around since the 1970s, Leland. And I was too little. You probably weren't even alive.
Neither you nor I was alive to see stagflation. High inflation, high unemployment. We're not going to date ourselves. Come on. Strength of the economy is poor. 57% in Wisconsin, 60% in Pennsylvania, 62% in Nevada, 64% in Arizona, Michigan, North Carolina, Georgia, all happen to be swing states as well. I'm wondering if people, and I think this goes back to what you were talking about, stagflation in the 1970s. I don't think people realize, if it's poor now, how bad it can and very well might feel.
Oh, sure. I mean, this is a big concern. A big concern. I mean, Donald Trump, for as much as he hammers on Biden about the economy, has also made the point, like, gee, I don't want to come in and get a real mess. Because, by the way, no matter who's president now, you're probably looking at a real mess, because the inflation issue, that is front and center. And once the train leaves the station, it's very hard to contain this. The Federal Reserve doesn't even really have the power at this point. Hey, they would absolutely love to lower rates right now, Leland, and give the economy a little bit of a goose going into an election. It would make people feel better. It would maybe free up some spending, but they can't do it because inflation is already bad enough. So this is not a good scenario by any stretch of the imagination. I think that people should be prepared for more challenging and more inflationary times ahead.
The rule always is, right, in all of these bad times, the rich and Wall Street get richer. We saw it through the recession. We saw it through COVID. And now we're seeing it in this weird period as well, that those with a lot of money already who are invested in the stock market and able to take advantage of certain investment opportunities are doing extraordinarily well. The top 10% of households by wealth had $6.7 million on average. As a group, they held 66.9% of total household wealth. The bottom 50% had $50,000 on average, 2.5%. And the wealth gap, right, keeps widening. The middle class in America is disappearing.
And
does that ever
reverse?
So
fundamentally unfair. Right, fundamentally unfair. And every politician tells us they're there to help the middle class. The Federal Reserve wants to help the middle class. Well, guess what? None of this is helping the middle class, because the rich can handle inflation, right? It doesn't really matter that much if groceries go up 38% for the rich. But if you're living paycheck to paycheck and you're really dependent on having some fixed structure in your budget, this is going to hurt you badly. Well, I'll tell you, you know what? You see markets going higher when you got lots and lots and lots of cash being printed and circulated about. Markets markets move higher, which, guess what, benefits those that are invested in the market. So you got to be invested. I mean, you got to find a way to get invested in these markets and think about your future. It's important. But a lot of people, you know what, they don't have the luxury of that. And that's what's so disappointing, right? Disappointing to see, because this economic policy should be there for the betterment of everyone, to help the middle class, which is the strength, and historically anyway, Leland, has been the strength of the USA. If we don't have that, we really are a banana republic.
Well, 76research.com for your investment ideas, of course. I want to get you on this because I got about a minute, but it's an important point. George Will, Americans were born exceptionally free from a feudal past, hence free from an established church and an entrenched aristocracy. And now we look at the billionaires among us: Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg, Bill Gates. We put David Rubenstein of the Carlyle Group, not necessarily because of his massive wealth, all $3.8 billion is a lot, but because of how close he is to President Biden. President Biden stays at his home and the like. So the question to you, again, are we now becoming Great Britain with an entrenched aristocracy?
You know, it's an interesting point, because I was making the Banana Republic comparison, where you feel like you got a lot on the, top and a lot on the bottom and not a whole lot in between. But the European analogy is a very, very good one too. And I think Great Britain is something to look to. Look, we don't want to be Great Britain. We don't want to be Europe. We don't want to be France. Okay. We don't want to be the UK. We want to be the United States of America. And the only way we continue growing and growing and growing and really having this sort of thriving economy and being the envy of the world is by having a strong middle class. We don't have it, and that's shameful.
Nope. You know, Trish, we always appreciate your perspective and also your love of America and your dedication to the American dream. We've seen it for a long time. I got to work with you at Fox and always appreciated it then, and enjoy talking to you now. Thank you. Have a great weekend.
Likewise. I love the show. You guys are doing great stuff.
We'll talk soon. Political courage is hard to find these days. Democrats won't say Biden is too old. Republicans won't say Trump is too crazy. So it's worth celebrating, right, when someone just tells the truth, tells it the way it is, even at their own peril. State Senator Susan Eggman from California had enough. Some of her Democratic colleagues objected to making solicitation of sex from a minor a felony.
I'd like to say, as a progressive, proud member of this body for the last 12 years, I'm done. I'm done with us protecting people who would buy and abuse our children. I don't want people buying little girls anymore. And I'm tired of saying it's okay and that we have to protect the men who do it.
It seems utterly obvious, right, that if you try to buy sex with a minor, a young girl, you should go to jail for the rest of your life. But somehow, even after the results of California's crime problems, it is not obvious, except to Senator Eggman. We're trying to have her on the program next week. Boston's mayor, though, is totally unconvinced. She would like to turn Boston into San Francisco, and plans not to prosecute such crimes as shoplifting, larceny, disorderly conduct, and marijuana possession. You might remember she's also the mayor who had the elected of color holiday party, here's the email, for black and brown elected officials only. Mayor Michelle Wu also doesn't want to keep track of gang members either. She wants to eliminate the city's gang registry. To be fair, I guess you could say it takes real courage to follow down California's path. We, of course, all know where this is headed. First wrote about this in War Notes. warnotes.com to subscribe for free. It's our newsletter that comes out every day at 4:05 p.m. Gives you our thoughts on the most important stories of the day. You can respond. We read a number of your thoughts on the air. Also talk to us on social media at Leland Vittert on Instagram and Twitter. This morning, President Trump gave a preview of what the next 157 days are going to be. Victimhood. Does America care about his grievances or their own problems when we come back?
So we're going to be appealing this scam. We're going to be appealing it on many different things. He wouldn't allow us to have witnesses. He wouldn't allow us to talk. He wouldn't allow us to do anything. The judge was a tyrant.
not very well, especially considering the direction we're headed in. Just listen to Republican Congressman Ronnie Jackson talking about what the next, if elected, Trump administration should do.
President Biden should just be ready, because on January 20 of next year, when he's former President Joe Biden, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. And I am going to encourage all of my colleagues and everybody that I have any influence over as a member of Congress to aggressively go after the president and his entire family.
With us now, David Gelman, Trump surrogate, member of the Republican National Lawyers Association. Welcome to the program. Chris Hahn, host of the Aggressive Progressive podcast, former senior aide for Senator Chuck Schumer. Gentlemen, good to see both of you. David, look, I think, and we've laid them out on this show, that the president's got a lot. President Trump has a lot of legitimate grievances about what happened in New York. How is it American, though, to say what's happening to me is un-American, so now as Republicans, we should do the exact same thing to the other side when we're in power?
Well, look, if I was President Trump, I'd be really upset as well. But he's not doing that. Look, the Democrats are playing with fire. They're saying, hey, if you're against us, we're going to go after you. Because if anybody believes that the trial that just happened yesterday for the past 6 weeks was fair and wasn't any political motivation at all, they have to be blind. They're not being true to themselves. All President Trump is saying is, hey, look, if I'm President Biden, you have a lot of skeletons in your closet, and you've been accused of a lot of things, and they're going to go look at you just as like they're looking at me, or you're making them look at me. So he's not saying.
David, maybe you didn't understand the question that I asked you, because I said that if you say going after President Trump and trying to find things, which is what Alvin Bragg said he was going to do, doing that is wrong. Okay, agreed, stipulated, because I'm the only non-lawyer on this panel. But how can you then say, hey, we're going to go do the very same thing and go investigate Joe Biden and find a crime then?
Well, the reason is you don't have to find a crime with Joe Biden. Joe Biden has literally proven again and again that he's committed certain crimes. Remember, the special counsel even said he did. The only reason they didn't even charge him was because he was an old man with a poor memory.
Well, to be fair, that is what the special counsel said. Han, there seems to be this talking point going around among Democrats that you can't elect Donald Trump because he's going to do the exact same thing to Democrats that we're doing to him. How are Democrats not doing the exact same thing that they're accusing Republicans of? Come on.
I mean, Republicans believe in states' rights, right? This was a state prosecutor, it was a local prosecution of Donald Trump for a crime he committed in Manhattan. And there was a jury of his peers, which his attorneys participated in selecting. And by the way, held on to 5 preemptory challenges, so they must have liked these jurors and their chances with him. I don't like the idea of saying that Trump's going to do this to us if he wins. I think that the American people need to know what Biden's going to do for them. I think elections are always about the future, not the past. But I do think
Han,
everything matters in a very close election.
With a Republican DA in some podunk town in Missouri, where I'm from, going, I'm going to find a way to investigate Joe Biden and go after him. You'd be okay with a trial against Joe Biden after that? Come on.
So, the trial in New York was on a crime that somebody went to jail for, that Donald Trump directed. It was a reasonable thing to be brought. This was not made up by Alvin Bragg. This was done by Donald Trump. Michael Cohen went to jail for it.
Han, I cannot believe you're trying to litigate the
you want to make something up?
David, go ahead.
It certainly was made up. Nobody has ever been charged with this crime, ever. Not in New York, not anywhere else. And then they had to make up a crime to put onto it so they could bring this
what I'm trying to do is
back up.
I'm trying to at least look forward.
Falsification of business records is
how is it that the country goes forward? Okay, if you've got Donald Trump leading chance to lock her up in 2016, then you've got Democrats saying, hey, look, I'm going to look at Donald Trump until I find a crime and prosecute him. And then you've got Republicans saying, hey, when we're in power, we're going to go investigate Joe Biden. Never mind, this doesn't have anything to do with helping the American people. How does this end well?
Yeah, it ends when Donald Trump is defeated in November, which he surely will be. Okay, we're not sending a felon to the White House. It's over for him. okay? The American people are not going to go backwards. They're going to go forwards. Donald Trump, you said at the beginning of the show, he had an opportunity today with a huge audience to make his case for the presidency. Instead, he cried for an hour. Governor Huckabee tried to defend him in the same way that Republicans defended him after the 2020 election. Oh, let him blow off some steam. No, this is who he is. He's a whiny little cur who cares about himself and not the American
Chris,
people.
No name calling.
We're not on the golf course.
No name calling.
He's a felon.
Go ahead, David.
That's exactly what the Democrats wanted to have here.
He is a felon.
Want to have the G in front of President Trump. This is a beautiful talking point, beautiful.
You know what? Here's the thing. Back in the day, people had shame. And when you caught them sleeping with a porn star when they were married to somebody else, they just dropped out. This guy has no shame. America was better off when politicians had shame. It's a sad day.
If we're believing Stormy Daniels and Michael Cohen, I think we all have a lot of shame then.
Well, I will say this. The idea that Michael Cohen has not been...
You shall know them by the company they keep.
I knew this was going to be good.
It's true.
I knew this was going to be. I think we're going to start having Friday with Chris and David. And
we were on this morning and we had a blast, so why not?
But I
could head home early. All right, guys,
I know. I got to tell you, I do love the vault, though, David.
Okay, the vault's real. We figured that out. All right, we got to run. Have a great weekend, gentlemen. All your putts within 5 feet are good. Thank you very much. President Biden says peace in the Middle East is at hand. That he also did that today. All Israel has to do, he says, is surrender to Hamas. Can he make the deal to save his presidency?
I think what will happen if this moment is lost. We can't lose this moment.
President Biden just offered Hamas a deal he thinks they can't refuse. They get to stay in power. America will pay to rebuild Gaza. And most importantly, President Biden will stick it to the Israeli prime minister when he comes to address Congress next month. Here's the president today.
Here's what it would include: a full and complete ceasefire, a withdrawal of Israeli forces from all populated areas of Gaza, release of a number of hostages, including women, the elderly, the wounded, in exchange for the release of hundreds of Palestinian prisoners.
All right. Israel doesn't even get all of its hostages back until they agree to a complete ceasefire, with Hamas, the group that attacked them on October 7th, still in power. What could possibly go wrong? Joining us now, White House columnist for our partners at The Hill, Niall Stanage. Welcome back. Good to see you. Thank you, my friend. All right. How much pressure did the White House have to exert on the Israelis to get this?
Well, I mean, obviously it's not exactly what the Israelis want, to say the least. But here's the thing that confuses me. Why is President Biden proposing a deal that he says is backed by the Israelis? Why are the Israelis not publicly proposing it then? I also think he would dispute your contention that it leaves Hamas in power. It's vague about what happens later. It says Israel will have its security needs met, but not how that happens.
Well, it says not how that happens. It also doesn't say Hamas will leave power. I think you make a great point. Is President Biden sort of trying to will this plan into existence, get Hamas to agree to it, and then when the Israelis quibble, he's able to embarrass them?
Well, what he's trying to do is get some cessation of violence from this horrific violence that has lasted for months and months and months and claimed 36,000 Palestinian lives, about 1,200 Israeli lives. He has to be seen politically, which I think is your point, to be doing something, because the Democratic base, as you and I have talked about before, is up in arms about what has happened.
So the Democratic base is up in arms, and obviously you've got a pro-Israel base that's extremely upset still about the hostages, more than 100 still in captivity, including Americans, a 26-year-old woman among them. Is this enough for either side?
I don't know that it's enough for Mr. Netanyahu, who has claimed that Israel wants to have total victory. It certainly is not enough for the most right-wing members of his cabinet, Mr. Ben-Gvir and others, who want a reoccupation of Gaza. Now, whether it's enough...
that's just lunacy. But why would Hamas, that has seen support among American youth in droves, the Ayatollah has been tweeting now in support of the pro-Palestinian protesters, why would Hamas take this deal and not hold out for more?
Well, because lots of Palestinians are being killed, for a start.
Hamas doesn't really care about that.
Well, look, hold on a second, Leland. To say pro-Hamas demonstrators, for a start, people are protesting about the plight of the Palestinians. This is a disagreement.
Okay,
it's not fair to call them pro-Hamas demonstrators.
And I wouldn't say it's fair to call them pro-Palestinian if they're chanting slogans that are similar to Hamas, but we'll move past that. The Ayatollah is tweeting in support of these protests. We can agree on that, right? So clearly, Hamas and the Iranians understand they've got President Biden over a barrel domestically. He's worried about protests at the DNC. Why wouldn't they hold out for more?
Because they know that Israel is going to keep attacking them, presumably. Israel will get further isolated if it keeps doing that. There is building criticism not only from the Middle East or from Iran, but from European ministers.
Absolutely. Ireland just recognized the Palestinian state. So why would Hamas take this deal and not hold out for a better deal? Because they're going to know, the closer we get to August, the more pressure there is on President Biden.
I think that actually is a fair point. Why would they not hold out for more? Now, the question is, why do they think that they have the advantage? Hasn't Israel handed them a moral advantage by its own conduct?
I think you may be right that they certainly have the advantage. Hamas does have the advantage. I would argue it's because Israel has done a very poor job telling its own story, number one. And number two, there's enormous anti-Israel sentiment in Europe and around America's college campuses. Shockingly enough, we do not have time to fully litigate that situation. Quick prediction. Will there be a ceasefire before the DNC?
No, not in my opinion.
Wow. So you think this is going to keep going, this proposal?
I don't think that either side is going to go for this proposal, and I think President Biden will lose the election if this conflict is still ongoing a month or so before the American presidential.
And we have to think about when Prime Minister Netanyahu comes and speaks.
Good to see you.
Conversation to be continued. Have a great weekend, Niall. Thank you very much. Wow. It has certainly been a week. This weekend, take some time with people you love, and please don't talk about politics. Talk about what you're going to do this summer, why you love each other, and why America, for all of its faults, still the greatest country around.